Hi, let's jump straight into the code. One of the first things that you will notice about Python is the fact that it is a very lean language. Unlike PHP, Python does not have semicolon line endings. Something else that Python does not make use of that is imperative in PHP is opening and closing curly braces. In Python, indentation is the replacement. In our code example, we will be looking at building a to-dos app. So let's start by creating a function called getList for both PHP and Python to demonstrate the differences that we have just spoken about. In PHP, you would create a function, e.g. getList, the following way. Now, you will notice that I'm setting a few parameters in Sublime Text specifically for PHP. The first of which is setting my syntax highlighting to PHP in this empty file, and the second being opening my PHP tags. Now, if I was to define a PHP function, I would use the word function, followed by the name of the function, followed by open close brackets, followed by these curly braces that I've been speaking about. Now, there is a lot about this that is specific to PHP, where, again, as I mentioned in a previous lecture, lends itself from C. If I was to write the same function in Python, it would look a little bit different. For starters, let me set my syntax highlighting to Python. And secondly, you will notice that when I create my function, I'm doing it slightly differently. Oh, there we go. First mistake. So, what you will notice is, for starters, instead of using the word function, I have used the word def, which stands for define or define function. GetList would be the name, open close brackets as you would in PHP. The assumption here for both PHP and Python is that you may or may not want to pass parameters into this space. Now, what is interesting about Python is that instead of using these curly braces as one would with PHP, we instead simply go to the next line and make sure that this line is indented at least one tab space or two regular spaces in. From here, we can write the rest of our function. Now, what you will also notice, which I did not show in the PHP example, was the fact that at the end of this line, we simply hit return and do not pass a semicolon, as you would with PHP. Let me just quickly get the PHP function back. So this would be an example of a PHP function returning something. Now you'll notice it looks a bit funny because I don't have my syntax highlighting on. I always like to indent my functions regardless of the programming language. And then in Python, I would define my function as so. Now you will notice there are a few differences between these two function definitions. As we mentioned, the first being the semicolon at the end of every line of functional code. The second being that Python does not use curly braces, while PHP does. The third, the word function has now been replaced in PHP versus Python to def. You will also notice that there is a colon at the end of the function definition in Python. Now, the reason for this colon is not for functional purposes, but rather for display purposes and to indicate that there is going to be an indented code block following this. We could just as easily remove this followed, and as long as our next line of code is indented, we could follow the function like this. I prefer to keep the colon here for the sake of best practices and for legibility.